20 years. Same high standards of care, offering villa homes, supportive living, skilled nursing, bounce back rehab, and memory lane. For more, click on our icon at DeWittDailyNews.com.
DeWittDailyNews.com is the area's leading local news source 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Get the latest local news, obituaries, police blotter, weather forecast, and more with no paywall. Head to DeWittDailyNews.com to get the local information you need to know.
Chip Flory here, the host of AgriTalk, the nation's longest-running agriculture talk show. I'm here to remind our listeners on Central Illinois' agriculture station, WHOW, that you can hear our show weekday mornings from 10 to 11 on WHOW's many platforms. On the Big 1520 across Central Illinois, 92.3 FM in DeWitt County, and now on 106.5 FM in Logan County, and on the WHOW app. AgriTalk on WHOW.
News time 8 minutes after 8 o'clock on this Tuesday. Top of the morning from the newsroom of Regional Radio and DeWittDailyNews.com. I'm Seth Lawrence with this expanded local newscast. We stream to Facebook and YouTube. It's brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Pekin Insurance agent in Clinton. The city of Clinton is moving forward in its pursuit of a new facility, and the next step is underway. Last week, the Clinton City Council approved its designers and engineers for the project. City Administrator Taylor Baxter says the process is now focused on a needs assessment.
Very excited with this one. This is a fun project, and it's definitely much needed. As we've talked about before in the past, like you mentioned, the city kind of cemented it last night with their signature. Tom signed the contract for design build services with Core Construction and Farnsworth Group. So what we've decided to do is kind of break this up into two different phases. The first phase, which is what we're working on as of today, now we're live, is doing a needs assessment of our current operations. So in City Hall, for those that don't know, we have all of our administration, our finance, our water billing collections, human resources, front desk, all that stuff. In addition to our police station, our fire station, it's all in one building. The elevator, it's been an issue I've talked about before. So there's a lot of things that are, okay, we need to look at what we have. So that's what they're going to come in and do and see where our inefficiencies are, what that could potentially look like in square footage in a new building. And then what they're going to do is they're going to create a mock design, okay, based on what we've heard from department leadership and the commissioners and staff. We're going to put a square footage together, and this is what its design could look like. And then additionally, okay, you have that. Now what's your guaranteed max price? We move into phase 2 after that. We find a site location. We fit the design building on that actual site, and then we update all of the documents, the bidding documents. We go out to bid, and then construction begins.
While the needs assessment goes on, the city is in pursuit of a location with a couple of ideas for locations. Baxter says the needs assessment will give them an idea of how much space they're going to need.
And this is where that design, those two phases really kind of separates that, because I've heard horror stories in other communities where they don't break this up into two different phases, and then they go back and they're like, okay, that's not really what we wanted, and then they spend a lot of money basically wasting time and money. So we have an idea of this is what we want. This is the square footage. It's a mock design. It's not final or anything. We find the spot. I get what you're saying, but it really gives us an idea. Okay, let's say we have the square footage, but then the guaranteed max price is $20 million. We don't have that, so the project would just be null and void, and we wouldn't be able to do anything. We kind of work on things on the back end, get the price where we want it. Okay, now it's official. We're moving forward. Let's find a spot.
The city is targeting the green space on Center Street across from the library for its new building. The Warner Foundation owns that space currently. Baxter believes it would be an ideal location for a new facility.
We want to be as close as we can to downtown as possible for a lot of different reasons. One of the main reasons is for public safety. So being as centrally located as we can for our fire department, it gives them the ability to kind of spread out across town and go every which direction. Additionally, we have our police department works very closely with the DeWitt County Sheriff's Office, and we share a lot of the same infrastructure as far as their reporting systems. A lot of the back-end technology is tied directly to the county. So it being as close as we can, there's underground cables that go between the two spaces, and so for that reason alone, I mean, it's a huge spot. And if you look at downtown, there's not a whole lot of vacant space, so the ideal spot, yes, is going to be Prairie Passage. That would be awesome. But we also know that the Warners have a great respect in this community, and that space has been reserved for a long time, as leaving it as a green space. So we have no idea what's going to happen. Our goal is to try to make it somewhere downtown. We don't know where that's going to be, so we'll see what happens.
Because of the limited space in town where the city wants to be, Baxter indicates renovating an existing building is not out of the question. However, it would have to be ideal in size and affordability. The DeWitt County Sheriff's Office investigation into the scene of an accident which occurred at approximately 4 o'clock on June 28th revealed that 53-year-old Carrie Hood of Warrensburg was traveling southbound on Johnston Street, approaching the intersection of State Highway 54. 28-year-old Tristan Dilley of Mount Pulaski was traveling in the same direction. Hood stated she stopped at the stop sign and was rear-ended by Dilley. Hood sustained damage to the rear passenger side bumper and tailgate. Dilley stated Hood hit the brakes at the stop sign, let off the brakes, and then hit the brake again once until she began to move forward. This action caused Dilley to collide with the rear end of Hood. Dilley sustained damage to the front driver side bumper and hood. Both vehicles were driven from the scene. Dilley was issued a citation for failure to reduce speed and avoid an accident. Dilley was released with no required court's appearance. The weather in Illinois will turn dry and warm the later we get into July. Ed Shimon at the National Weather Service in Lincoln indicates initially July will trend about normal for temperatures and precipitation.
The 6 to 10 day outlook has near normal temperatures, which were normally in the mid 80s, and then near normal precipitation, just slightly above normal precipitation for the 7th through the 11th. So heading into the middle of the month, not a lot of heat, not excessive heat anyway. Mid 80s is still pretty toasty. But as we head towards the 15th of the month, right in the middle, then the outlooks are starting to tip towards the above normal temperatures, and there's a lot of heat out west. The Western Plains and the Rocky Mountains all the way to the West Coast are really building some heat as we start off July. So some of that's going to start to creep east as we head into the last half of the month. The 3 to 4 week outlook shows, a 60 to 70% chance above normal temperatures, which means, you're getting into the 90s and the humidity's going to potentially rise. But, unfortunately, it looks like below normal precipitation for the last half of July. It's a pretty wide area. It's all the way from Texas all the way to the southern Great Lakes. So it's, the storm tracks look like they're going to be going through the Great Lakes and then the southeast U.S. So we may be missing out on some storm tracks as heat builds and moves in. So that's not a good sign there.
According to Shimon, the jet stream shifts north, and that creates large areas of warm air over the United States, and that's likely what we'll get later in July.
And this is where
seasonal high pressure that develops generally over the southwest and stays there, and they're in the hundreds for days, if not weeks at a time. But sometimes, especially midsummer, the jet stream will recede into Canada, and then there's just a big dome of hot, sinking air that just develops over the, a large portion of the United States. And that's when you really create a heat dome of air. The air sinks, so there's not a lot of storms. If some do develop, they really don't last very long because of that dome of very hot air. So that's what we're going to probably see here heading into the last half of July if these outlooks really hold true, is some of that heat kind of creeping in, and we may end up needing, depending on how long the heat lasts in consecutive days, maybe some heat headlines, a heat advisory, and excessive heat warning, depending on how high it gets. It's not showing, like a intense heat, but certainly enough that if there's consecutive days of this, we probably will see some impacts again as we did in June there.
Average temperatures from the start of July to the end of the month do not tend to move much. Additionally, with precipitation starting slow this month and not a lot in the forecast later in July, we could get dry fast.
Yeah, July, we typically see temperatures averaging in the upper 80s, mid to upper 80s, and lows in the mid 60s. Precipitation wise, we see almost 5 inches of rain, 4.91 average. Even to get near normal, we're going to have to get some really decent rainfall here coming up to catch up to that level, because we're definitely not starting out with a lot of rain. We've had dry conditions so far, and like we have rain in the forecast here tonight, Wednesday, Thursday. We'll see what pans out from that. We're looking at about an inch in the forecast for rainfall amounts, inch to inch and a quarter. On average. I mean, some deluges can give 3 inches, and then across the street gets 1, but
right.
Average, it's about an inch and a quarter there. So hopefully we do get some of those beneficial rains out of this period, because as we head in the last half of July, those outlooks are kind of trending down below normal. So
yeah,
we'll see what happens there, but that's what's looking like.
Despite a nice wet start to the summer, Shimon notes things are getting dry in Illinois, and drought is starting to be monitored in parts of the state. Corn and soybeans remain ahead of growing progress, as we hear in this weekly crop report. Corn silking is ahead of last year's pace in the 5-year average, says crop statistician Mark Schleusner.
39% of corn acres are silking compared to 21% 1 year ago and 16% for the 5-year average. 1% of acres have reached the dough stage. Corn conditions improved slightly and were rated 10% very poor to poor, 23% fair, and 67% good to excellent.
Soybeans are setting pods ahead of the 5-year average, while Schleusner updates the condition of the crop.
And this is where that
9% of soybean acres were setting pods compared to 3% for the 5-year average. Soybean conditions improved slightly and were rated 10% very poor to poor, 24% fair, and 66% good to excellent.
Conditions varied across the state, but Schleusner points out it was overall a cooler and wet week in Illinois.
Temperatures averaged 73.2 degrees, and that was 1.8 degrees below normal. Rainfall averaged 1.18 inches, more than 1/4 inch above normal. Eastern and central parts of the state were drier than normal, but the rest of the state had above average rainfall. There were 5.4 days suitable for field work around the Prairie State last week, and topsoil moisture was rated 5% very short, 28 short, 65 adequate, and 2% surplus. That is wetter than 1 week ago.
Winter wheat harvest is ahead of last year's pace in the 5-year average at 93% complete. Schleusner says pasture conditions improved significantly.
Winter wheat harvest reached 93% finished compared to 86 1 year ago and 85 normally. The second cutting of alfalfa hay is 49% finished, and other hay is 96% harvested. Pasture conditions improved significantly and were rated 11% very poor to poor, 23% fair, and 66% good to excellent.
Schleusner says be on the lookout. NASS will publish the monthly crop production report this Friday. It will include updates of yield forecasts for wheat and oat across the country. News streams to Facebook.